Verse 17. Remember in chapter 12, what's happening is it's a picture of the gospel. The seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent emerge right here. Okay, these two lines meet and there's a clash. Okay, and ultimately that clash represents Christ and Satan, the anointed one and the dragon. You finally meet the dragon slayer after all these many months and years of studying the Bible. You finally see this picture very clearly. And so in chapter 12, you meet this. And what you see is Messiah coming. He comes victoriously and he's called up into heaven. The dragon's enraged. Satan's enraged. His time is brief. God has set a limit on his time. And so what he does, because he cannot get at Christ, he gets at the followers of Christ. You see that. Verse number 17. You got to understand verse number 17 to understand chapter 13. So the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. Now chapter 13 explains to us the means by which the dragon makes war with the people of God. Okay? You're going to see two beasts in chapter 13. Okay? And these two beasts are the instruments, are the tools of this dragon to get at the people of God. So look at chapter 13, verse number 1. And the dragon stood on the sand, the seashore. Okay? So picture is the dragon's going to summons up two beasts. One coming up out of the sea, the other coming from the land. Now, you see this in verse number 1. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. Now, in biblical literature, when you meet this picture of the sea, it is a picture of chaos. In the Jewish mind, there was great fear. In fact, in the ancient mind, there was great fear and uncertainty surrounding the sea. That's what makes the story of Jonah so compelling. Okay? Jonah had rather face the uncertainty and the fear of the unknown in the sea than to go do what God had asked him to do. The sea is a place of utter chaos. Okay? And so when you find in Genesis chapter 1, God's Spirit hovering over the sea, you see God really conquering and subduing at that point in time. It's a picture of God bringing order out of the cosmic chaos. And so here is that picture of chaos again. Out of chaos arises this beast coming up out of the sea, it says. Now, it's interesting, at the end of the book, you see a picture, and absent from eternity is what? There's no more sea. God has put it in chaos. God has set a limit on this. Okay? So that's not just a detail. It's not just a geographical note. Well, there's no more oceans, no more waters. No, he's not talking about that. He's picturing for us the very real opposition and chaotic reality of a godless existence that we face in our lives. So here is the picture. The beast rising up. 10 horns, 7 heads, much like the dragon. Okay, he's mimicking and imitating the dragon as we looked at in chapter 12. And on his horns were 10 diadems. So again, he's ruling and reigning. And on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast, which I saw, was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. Is anybody scared yet? I mean, this is Halloween kind of imagery. I mean, it's just and honestly, in the first century, the stories like this would have been very compelling. Without the advent of TV and visual effects, you can imagine what the mind would conjure up in images such as this. It would have been very powerful, very effective. Now, what kind of beast was this? Well, what John does is what he always does, is he borrows images from the Old Testament, brings them forward to the New Testament, and gives us fuller perspective on it. So if you will, I want you to just hold your place here. Look back at the book of Daniel. You're going to see a composite of 4 different beasts in this book, and this beast in the Revelation. Chapter number 7 of Daniel. Daniel sees a vision of 4 beasts in chapter 7. The first beast that he sees, you can see it there in verse number 4 of Daniel chapter 7, is lion-like. Okay? This is Babylon. We come to understand that this represents Babylon. You read on a little bit further, verse number 5, you see one resembling a bear. This is the Persian Empire. Okay? You read on a little further, verse number 6, and there's a leopard. We understand that represents the Greek Empire. Beyond that, you see a dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong beast. That's verse number 7. This represents Rome. And so when you get over here in Revelation chapter 13, what you see is all these different beasts combined into one beast. Okay? This beast is the culmination of all these beasts. Let's read it again. Verse number 2 of chapter 13. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. So it's a composite of all these kingdoms. Now, what did these kingdoms have in common? Here's what they had in common. They were not the kingdom of God. They were the kingdom of man. They stood in opposition to God. You and I need to understand that these kingdoms were the kingdoms of this world, standing in opposition to the great and majestic King. And in fact, in the middle, you see in Daniel's vision, the Ancient of Days appears and talks about this particular thing. But here is really what I want you to understand. This beast represents anti-Christian government. The government of this world in opposition to Christ and His people. Now, who received the letter of Revelation initially? 7 churches. When did they live? First century. Who you think might have stood in opposition to the Christians in that day and time? Rome. Think Rome, okay? John is using veiled references to Rome, okay? If he writes in plain language and it gets back, well, he's in bigger trouble than he's already in. So these are apocalyptic imagery, a way to write in code in the first century that his audience would have understood, but the interceptors may not have understood at all. This is a writing for the initiated in reality. And so Rome stood in opposition to Christ and to His people. Okay? Look at verse number 3. Let's before we get there, look at the end of verse number 2. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. So the source of this king and his kingdom is not heavenly, but it literally comes up out of the abyss. Okay, it's sewer filled. It's evil. It's of the evil one, and he's been given power and authority by the beast. Look at verse number 3. I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. Does that remind us of something? There was a lamb, I think, if you remember back in chapter 5. The lamb was standing as though it had been slain. So it was dead and back to life. Here's this beast, dead and back to life. Now, what in the world is this? Well, I don't want to be too specific, okay? So I'm gonna just kind of be as vague as I can. But here's what I believe it's teaching us: is that this kingdom somehow comes to an end, or so it seems, and then is almost, as it were, brought back to life. Rome was a powerful force in the first century AD, the most powerful force. At the pinnacle of its power, or I wouldn't say pinnacle, but a very powerful force. Nero was serving as its emperor at this time. 68, I believe it is AD, maybe it's 67, I may have my dates wrong. Something changes the Roman Empire drastically. Nero takes his own life. And the pronouncement went out, the empire was dead. Now think about it. If you're in the first century, and you're a Christian, and you find out Nero's dead, what are you doing? You're throwing a party, aren't you? Okay? Because this guy, while Rome burned, he pointed fingers at the Christians. And he accused them, kind of probably to deflect attention from himself. So he falsely accuses Christians of lighting Rome on fire and focuses anti-Roman power against Christianity. Okay, so he's clearly in John's crosshairs. And he dies. But guess what? That's not the end of persecution. Persecution comes back. Domitian, end of the first century. There he is, persecuting Christians again. Roman Empire is revived, as it were, from the dead. Now, this pictures for us, I believe, the opposition that has happened over time throughout the centuries against the people of God. You ever heard the name Dietrich Bonhoeffer? He didn't like what was going on in Germany in the 30s. He spoke out against it. Nazis. Before anybody was really ahead of the curve. And here's what Hitler and his regime demanded. They demanded what Rome demanded back then, and that was absolute and total allegiance. Okay? You understand that Dietrich Bonhoeffer and many others literally laid down their lives for their faithfulness to Jesus Christ. That's exactly what was happening in the first century. It happened just recently, and it still goes on. This opposition by the government to Christ and His followers. Notice how this all plays out. Verse number 4. They worship the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war with him?" There was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme His name and His tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Now, there is a constant theme in that's subtle in our English language. But if you're a recipient in the first century, this letter would have come to you written in the Greek language. And coming in Greek, you would have noticed that these verbs, speaking of this beast that comes up, these verbs are passive. Verse number 5, there was given to him. That's a passive verb, okay? And authority to act for 42 months. That's passive. Verse number 7. It was also given to him. You see this repeated over and over. Verse number 15. And it was given to him. Now let me ask you, who's doing the giving here? You know who it is? It's God. Over 20 times in the book of Revelation, this passive tense is used. And it helps the reader to understand one clear thing. Guess what? God is still in charge. Even in the height of opposition to His people and His plan, God is the one who is in charge. Daniel said it this way: He raises up kings and He destroys kings. God is the one who puts people on the throne and He takes them down from the throne. And so the beast is given this power to oppose the people of God. Look at verse number 7. It was also given to him to make war with the saints. And who are the saints? It's not stained glass superhero Christians. It's people who profess Jesus as Lord and Savior. Those who've been blood-bought by the Lamb, who've repented of their sins and embraced Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. The church at Corinth was called saints, okay? It's Christians. It's a synonym for the church, the people of God, okay? There's the picture. And so the beast is making war with the people of God, but he has a limited time to do that. We found that it was 42 months, 3.5 years, a symbolic period of time in which God has allowed persecution of His people. It's the picture you see there in Revelation chapter 6 where the martyrs are crying out, "Where's the justice, God?" And He said, "Wait just a little bit longer." Time is short in this picture. Verse number 8. All who dwell on the earth will worship Him. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with a sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. So, who is it that pays homage to the beast? The unbelievers, church. It's not those who committed their lives to Christ. It's those who have not committed their lives to Christ. It's those who aren't on the heavenly registry. Okay? These people follow the beast. Now, in the first century, the Roman Empire wanted to do something. They wanted to unite all parts of the empire around Caesar. So you know what they did? They exalted Caesar to divine status. And exalting Caesar to divine status, it mandated that everybody in the empire utter this one phrase. You don't even have to mean it. You just have to say it. All you have to say is this: Caesar is Lord. Now most polytheists, those who believe in many gods, they just added Caesar to their list of gods. No big deal. But to Christians who believe that there was only one, and His name wasn't Caesar, this was blasphemy. And so they, in order to be good citizens, were faced with this choice. Will I remain faithful to Jesus, or will I pledge allegiance to Caesar? You know what? Many of them refused allegiance to Caesar at the price of their own blood. They paid ultimate price. That is the picture. You know what he's calling for there at the end of verse number 10? Perseverance. Being faithful, okay? Not compromising, not quitting on Christ, being faithful to the end. So you see the opposition by anti-Christian government there, verses 1 all the way to verse number 10. Notice this other aspect of it. Not only do you see anti-Christian government, but false religion. Look at verse number 11. I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. So this anti-Christian leader, as it were, comes up and he looks lamb-like. Now, have you ever been scared of a lamb? Fuzzy tail, fluffy, white, soft, passive-looking creatures. This is a very deceptive picture, okay? Because externally, this person or this system looks good and safe, you know how you recognize it? When it starts to speak. It's not the words of the Lord, it's the words of the dragon. So the exterior part is the part that is so deceptive that you can discern what it is by the words out of its mouth. Look at verse 12. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence. And he makes the earth and those who dwell in it worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs so that even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free men and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the